tonight we're going to continue in Genesis 49. We're almost done with Genesis. Whoop, whoop. And then we'll see where we go next. It'll be in the Bible, I promise. It'll be in the Bible. But Genesis 49, we're going to be talking about blessing the family tree. We're going to have a lot of family time in this season. We've got Thanksgiving and then Christmas, a lot of family. So a lot of thoughts can go through our mind as far as, okay, what's going to happen with these kids? They're going to grow up and they're going to do what? And how can I impact them? And this is exactly where Jacob's at, Israel. He is at the end of his life, and it is time to give his last words. He's already been able to talk with Joseph and taking Ephraim and Manasseh underneath his responsibility. Joseph has handed them over so that they will actually become a part of the tribes of Israel and get the inheritance. And Joseph gets that double portion that's supposed to be going to the firstborn, but yet ends up going to Joseph and his sons. And so it's very interesting how that goes. But as we jump off of that, we are now jumping into how he blesses the rest of his sons. Now, we're going to try to take this as we go as a list, and I told one of the kids, because they get to take notes, and if they do their notes, then they turn them into me, and then they get some candy. Now, I told them, why don't you go ahead and draw each of the sons, thinking what they might have looked like, and then you got to put their name by each one, okay? So if that's going to keep you involved tonight, adults, go ahead and draw all of the sons, and so you can put their names by it, and then I'll even have a map up here to where maybe if you want to keep involved that way, or just look at the back of the Bible. You've always wondered what those maps are there for. Tonight you're going to be able to use one of those just to be able to see where all the tribes are and try to understand what's going on in this blessing that's happening. But blessing the family tree, this is what we jump into. We're going to start off here with the family meeting. Has anybody ever had a family meeting? Call everybody together. We got to talk about something serious, okay? And this is exactly what he's done. You go into verse number 1, and Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together, and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. Now, as we get into this, we're going to see how some of his sons he focuses on. And he talks about past sins that will affect the future. And that's important for us to be thinking about, because oftentimes the sins of the father affects those that come after. Have you ever noticed that? Sometimes that's a generational trend. It goes on. Hopefully, the sins of the father will stop with us, right? We don't have to continue those. Just because we grew up in that situation doesn't mean that you have to continue any of the things that God has said don't do. And yet there's going to be some sons that he's going to focus on and say, hey, this is the sin that you've done, and because of that, there's going to be some consequences. But there's also some guys, some sons that we've seen some positive growth in their lives. And because of that, we're seeing some pretty big blessing. Even in tonight, there's going to be some things that, as far as prophetic, that you're going to be able to see. We're not going to be able to understand everything that's put out here to the finest detail. I don't have enough time to be able to go into every single detail that's going on in here. So please bear with me on this. But as he brings the meeting in, he goes in and he talks to each one of his sons. And so he starts off with Reuben in verses 3 through 4. So there's your first guy. Go ahead and draw his face, okay? And then put his name up there, Reuben. If you think of like a Reuben sandwich, those are pretty good, okay? If that helps you remember, we need those illustrations in our head to remember these men. But Reuben, did he mess up ever in his life? Oh yeah, we all mess up. But yet there is one time in his life where you really focus on that you know that he truly messed up. And it was brought out in the Word. But we see there in verse 3, it says, Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. Listen, firstborn, especially back in this culture, this was a big time. This was important to be the firstborn son, and this is exactly who Reuben was. And so he's saying, hey, listen, this is the start of my lineage here. This is the start of my children. Here it is, Reuben, but unstable as water. Does anybody like the stability of water? Maybe some of you get sick out on the water when it's not so stable, especially when it gets stormy. but he says, you're unstable as water, thou shalt not excel. Ouch. Because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, then defilest thou it. He went up to my couch. He's going back to a time in Reuben's life in Genesis 35:22, where it says, and it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went in and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. Now, if this was my dad giving me a blessing at the end of his life, Lord willing, he's got plenty of years left. He's still a young pup, okay? We gotta say that, all right? But if this was at the end of his life and he was giving me his last words, this is not what I would like to hear. Listen, you're unstable as water. Why? Because of your sin. I can't trust you. You know, think about that. For someone who's given in and has defiled his father's commitment, okay, he can't trust him. He's divisive. He came in between and tried to put a wedge in the family. This is not something that you can depend upon. And so based on this, his leadership is not there. You'll even see it later on in Judges. Judges 5 and verse 15, it talks about the tribe of Reuben. It says, and the princes of Issachar were with Deborah, even Issachar and also Barak. He was sent on foot into the valley. For the divisions of Reuben there were great thoughts of heart. Why abodest thou among the sheepfolds to hear the bleatings of the flocks? For the divisions of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. The sins of the father has affected generations beyond. I mean, it's not like it's stopped. There's that division that's happened within the family that Reuben has started. And guess what? It's continued on down the line. This is one of those things that we got to be able to watch for as we are passing the baton, as we are trying to live our lives. What are we known for? What is our driving factor? And with Reuben, this was a struggle. You jump into the next two guys, and they were put together in this blessing because they had made a decision together. This is Simeon and Levi. Simeon and Levi, all right? We go into verse number 5 through 7. It says, Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. Oh, another positive one. How exciting to talk to your sons. And here is the description that you're giving to your sons, but instruments of cruelty. Why? O my soul, come not thou into their secret unto their assembly. Mine honor, be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they digged down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. What does this go back to? This goes back to the very time when Dinah was taken advantage of in dealing with Shechem. And guess what? They set him up for defeat. In their anger, they made a deal with this people group, and then they went in verse 25, Genesis 34:25, it says, and it came to pass on the third day when they were sore that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. Reactionary. Angry. This is what they were known for. And he's saying, hey, listen, I don't know about their assembly. And guess what? In the midst of that, they were split up. It's amazing in what happens in their situation. But we see here in Joshua 19:1 where it says in the second lot, this is where Simeon's going to be in the inheritance of the land. But it says in the second lot came forth to Simeon, even for the tribe of the children of Simeon, according to their families, and their inheritance was within the inheritance of the children of Judah. And you say, what is that talking about? Well, see, he said that all of these people were going to be in some interesting setups as far as their inheritance go. you actually find that the Levites never actually get a set of land like everybody else does. They get several cities that they are in charge of, and so they aren't set up. You don't see them on your map at the back of your Bible, okay? You don't see the Levites, and remember, the reason why was they were set apart for God, for coming in the priestly line. But you see here in the map that's up here, you see that in the interesting factor here, I can't remember if I've got a laser pointer on here or not, but you see within Judah, they're actually surrounding Simeon. It's almost like we got to surround these people because I don't know if we really trust them, but they're smack dab in the middle, and they almost get just taken over by what Judah has and what their allotment is within the inheritance. So when you see that, what's looking forward to and what's given to them, Jacob is pointing out, listen, we can't really trust these guys. Simeon and Levi, they were controlled by their anger. Do you want that to be your describing factor when you go? Or even as you've known throughout Taylorville, I was talking to the teens this last week in class, and I said, you know what, does Taylorville have a gossiping problem? And they all started laughing. Everybody knows everything. And if you don't, they'll put it either on Taylorville Anonymous on Facebook or they'll put it in Speak Out, one of the two, okay? But would you like to be known as the angry person? That's something that we dealt with up in Michigan as we were going and handing out flyers for Vacation Bible School. They opened up a door and said, who are you? And I'm handing out these flyers for Vacation Bible School. I just want to invite you in case your kids wanted to come to VBS. We would love to have them. You can come to our church. We'd love to have you at our church. And they say, you're not the Baptist church, are you? And I said, well, no. Because it was Dayton Center Church. It was a non-denominational church. It was very Baptistic, but I said, no. And they said, well, good. Because I would have slammed the door in your face if you were the Baptist church in town, because I don't want anything to do with that pastor, because he is an angry man. It's like, ouch. People didn't want anything to do with that ministry because of the anger displayed by the leadership. And it even affected other Christians within the area. It tried to dim the light that God's created us to be. Do we want to be known for that? You go on to someone who's very interesting here. You go on to Judah. And we've seen his excerpt in the scripture there, and how he even break away from Joseph to go to a very interesting situation with Judah, and how his family is messed up and he loses his children, and he has a very interesting relationship with his daughter-in-law, and it just doesn't work out so well. But then from there we see how he grows and he steps up and he leads, and Jacob recognizes the growth that's happened, and it just shows us how we're able to overcome our past because of what God has allowed us to be able to do. It's by his grace and his mercy that we can. And so in verse number 8, you find Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Why? He stepped in. He led when they were struggling. He led when they needed it. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Judah is a lion's whelp from the prey. My son, thou art gone up. He stooped down. He couched as a lion, and as an old lion who shall rouse him up. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. What is this doing? This is prophetic. It's looking forward. It's looking forward from the Genesis 3:15 passage of looking forward to that Messiah that's coming. But it says here, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come. You know, it's interesting what that word means there. It's talking about whose it is, as far as whose scepter it actually is. Because there's so many that try to come and try to rule over and try to take leadership, and yet there is only one. It's Jesus Christ who's going to come and he's going to rule over everything. And this is what it's looking forward to. And Jesus Christ coming from his line, but it says, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Verse 11, binding his foal unto the vine, and his donkey's colt unto the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. I mean, they have so much excess, and it's going to be so great. It's almost like paradise, where they're washing their clothes in the juices of grapes. I don't know if I would want to do that. I mean, that might I guess you could suck on your clothes all day long, like kids do. But this is just how amazing it's going to be. This is what he's looking forward to. In verse 12, his eyes shall be red with wine, and his teeth white with milk. It is absolutely flourishing. And you see this prophecy coming up in Revelation chapter 5 and verse 5. And I love this. And it says, and one of the elders saith unto me, weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. Why? Because he had the power to do it. He's the only one who has the power to be able to do this. This is looking forward to Jesus, who's going to come and get the job done. It's amazing. So you go from some rough situations that you're talking about with your children to a very positive one, looking forward into hope. Then we have several others that we go through. You have Zebulun, and you find that in verse number 13. And it talks there, and Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for an haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Okay, and this one is very interesting for people because you look at the map, and I'll just give another reference that it actually gives towards them taking advantage of the sea, but it goes in Deuteronomy chapter 33 and verses 18 through 19. It says, and of Zebulun he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tents. They shall call upon the people unto the mountain. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they shall suck of the abundance of the seas and of the treasures hid in the sand. So again, it's pointing out the very fact that they're going to take advantage of the sea trade that's going on there. And you say, well, do they actually butt up to the sea there? No, they don't. You actually see that they're in between Asher, who's on the shoreline, and Issachar. And many people, and up at the very tip top of Asher, you actually see there's a city there that's called Sidon. Now that was a big time seaport. A lot of trade that was going out of there and dealing with Phoenicia. And they say that the reason why they would have pointed to this is both twofold. One, could be more prophetic, but then also the other one was even though they were landlocked, they had some trade routes that went through, and they took great advantage of what was going on the sea. And so he's blessing him through that route, so we don't have to say, well, the Bible's wrong just because of that very factor, but there is thought process that they did use the sea for trade and took advantage of the influence of the sea there. You go on to another one, and again, there's some that we just don't spend a whole lot of time on, but you go on to Issachar, which you just saw there up on the map, and that is verses 14 through 15. Again, this is Issachar. It says, Issachar is a strong donkey couching down. Wouldn't you want to be called a donkey? I mean, come on, Dad. You just called Judah a lion, and I'm a donkey? It says he's a strong donkey couching down between two burdens. And he saw that rest was good in the land, that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant under tribute. Listen, this guy was looking forward to work. He was a hard worker, okay? And just like a donkey was able to bear the burden, that's what was given there. But on that side of things, if you're able to work hard, guess what? Invading armies could come in and take all of your stuff, and that's where the tribute would go to from the invading armies. So a lot of that could go towards your own people, but yet also to those that are around. So yes, he was a hard worker. But you go on to Dan. Dan, you're in here tonight. Way to go. Good job. Okay, so that's easy. Dan can draw him right there. He'll do a self-portrait. Verse number 16, Dan shall judge his people. There's to be justice that comes from there. As one of the tribes of Israel, Dan shall be a serpent, by the way. Here's another animal illustration to show what he's going to be like. An adder in the path that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. And we see some of this as they come into the promised land later on after Egypt, and they come in and they take over. They moved rather fast. But just like a serpent is much of a deceiver, you also see how they're sly and bringing in some of the bad stuff that they shouldn't be, okay? You see here in the next verse there, I believe I have Judges 18:27. Let's see here. Oh, it just went off there. Is it up there? Yeah. Okay, it just went off for me. Here, I'll read it. And they took the things which Micah had made, and the priest which he had, and came into Laish unto a people that were at quiet and secure, and they smote them with the edge of the sword and burnt the city with fire. So they were all enjoying their time in this city. They were quiet and secure, and here comes Dan just coming in and striking, just like he pictured here in these verses. And then there was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no business with any man, and it was in the valley that lieth by Beth-rehob. And they built a city and dwelt therein. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit the name of the city was Laish at first. And the children of Dan set up the graven image. Uh-oh. That was slick. You start doing exactly what God tells you to do and taking charge over the promised land, but then all of a sudden, instead of worshiping God, they slid in idol worship, which we often know is what they started thinking. I'm going to do what's right in my own eyes, start doing what I want to do, and they get in trouble, and then God has to bring a judge around to come and get them out of the situation that they're in. It is interesting how that works. But going on into the next one, you go into Gad. Gad. And verse number 19, it says, Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. He's a fighter. He's a scrapper. He might be overcome, but he's going to overcome at last. And you look forward into 1 Chronicles 5:18 through 19. It talks about the sons of Reuben and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh. So there's the Gadites there. Of valiant men, men able to bear buckler and sword and to shoot with bow and skillful in war, were 440,703 that went out to the war. And they made war with the Hagarites, with Jetur and Naphish and Nadab. Why am I bringing that up? Because in the map that I'm going to show here, you see where Gad's at. They're underneath East Manasseh. I don't know what happened to my map there. It just went bye-bye. But East Manasseh was up top. And then you had Gad right below. They were right on the border. They were always battling people. There was always people trying to come in and trying to take over. And guess what? When that's happening, you're constantly tested. And they had valiant men that came up and stood up and did what they needed to do to protect their people. And so this is something that he was bringing up there. Okay, let's see here. I think I lost my screens here, so we're just going to go old school. How about that? We can do that. Okay, let's go verse 20, verse number 20, and we're going to be talking about Asher. Yes, I was looking past it. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. It's looking at the land that they're going to be able to get. And this land is a fertile land. They're going to be able to provide lots of food and take care of things, but yet they're also providing royal dainties. So it's looking at the fact that they were able to actually give to dignitaries, royal dignitaries, but then also if you've got a lot of good stuff, that means the invading armies can come in, and so they also gave a lot of tribute to foreign dignitaries as well. Then you go on to the next one, Naphtali, and verse number 21. And it talks about how Naphtali is a hind let loose. He giveth goodly words. A hind let loose. This sounds like some of our 5-year-olds in Sunday school, okay? And I mean, they're just active. They're ready to go. They're free. And they were in a mountainous region. And so he giveth goodly words. This is a positive thing. Then you move on to Joseph. Joseph, in verse 22, it says, Joseph is a fruitful bow, even a fruitful bow by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him. What's that looking back to? It's looking back to the things that he's gone through, the grief that he's gone through within even his own family, and all the things that he's been through in his trials and slavery and in prison. Verse 24, but his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. Whose strength is it? God. See, sometimes we get caught up in the man thinking, man, Joseph is cool. Sometimes we give this God complex over to some human being, and yet we need to back up and say, listen, this isn't from Joseph himself. This is from God, that he's able to do what he has done. And again, this is positive. And Jacob is pointing the very fact that this is from God. We need to remember that. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Verse 25, even by the God of thy father who shall help thee, and by the Almighty who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. Lots of good things. But you know what? This is all pointing to what Ephraim and Manasseh is going to get, and that blessing that's been given. And we brought this up a couple weeks ago, 1 Chronicles 5, 1-2, and how it pointed out that that is what's going to be handed over in that double portion to Joseph's descendants. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but for as much as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, and the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. And then you even see he even surpassed Judah, who was a leader. For Judah prevailed above his brethren, and of him came the chief ruler, but the birthright was Joseph's. And this is what we see in the blessing. Why is this blessing here? Because you know what? Joseph was faithful. He's the one that stood the test of time because of God's strength. And then last you have Benjamin. Benjamin is interesting and how he's the little guy. Okay, he's the runt of the litter here. In verse number 27, Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. Can you imagine what Benjamin is thinking? Man, I am a wolf. That guy is a donkey. I am excited, okay? But you know, there is interesting people that have come from this line. One very well-known one is Saul, right? He came from the line of Benjamin. And they looked up to him. There was a lot of authority that he gave in the very beginning, and he was doing some good things in the beginning, and he presented strength in the beginning especially. But you know what? One of my favorite judges, the left-handed guy, Ehud, he comes from this one as well. Do you remember where he attacked the king, and he assassinated, and the king swallowed a sharp, pointy thing just in the wrong area, okay? He didn't get really, they didn't even find the weapon. I guess if CSI would have showed up, they wouldn't have been able to find it, right? Until afterwards. But this is where the strength came. There was strength in this. And you'll even find that in Benjamin, at one point, they even started a civil war in Judges chapter 20. And they were some tough cookies. They they stood the test of time against the rest of Israel. It's interesting what has come from him. So that toughness can be a good thing, but then also that toughness can be a bad thing where they divided Israel at the same time. You know, as you jump to the last part of the chapter, you see how it all finishes out with death. And this is where in verse 28, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is it that their father spake unto them and blessed them, everyone according to his blessing. He blessed them. And he charged them and said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people, bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite for a possession of a burying place. Verse 31, there they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife, and they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and there I buried Leah. And the purchase of the field and of the cave that is therein was from the children of Heth. Verse 33, and when Jacob had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered up his feet into the bed and yielded up the ghost and was gathered unto his people. Wouldn't that be a cool way to go? I've done my thing. I've blessed you. It's time. And he was gone. He's gone. I skipped a verse, and you probably thought that I was reading too fast. But I wanted to come back to this. You thought I just skipped over it. It's verse number 18. It's to point out that salvation is from God. Verse number 18, it says, I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. He's come to the end of his journey, and he's ready to receive God's salvation. He's at rest. He's at peace. You know, this takes a lot of faith for a man who's got a lot of children who's had issues in the past, right? It takes a lot of faith to be able to let go and to let God and do what he's going to do, because God can do so much more than I can. And even on that light, all the blessing that he's given to all of these guys, okay, even the positive ones like Joseph, which passes on to Ephraim and Manasseh, but also Judah and some of the other ones that were lightly hinted at as the positive nature. You know, we can lift up these guys as being able to do and accomplish a lot of things and to be able to go on and have a great lineage. But you know where salvation comes from? God. It doesn't matter how well we have it put together. It doesn't matter all of those things. What does matter is understanding that, yes, I am doing what I can for God, and I am seeking salvation from him. There's no man that's going to save us. It's God. So that's something that is important for us as we are dealing with our own family trees, as we're dealing with other generations, as we have impact on those that are after us and even before us. You know what? We can have an impact on any age group that we want to because of what God gives us, but this is something that we need to be able to hand off. There's a lot of good things that we can hand off, and hey, this is how you should do things. This is how you should work. These are a lot of good character traits and all of these things, but we've missed it if we're not passing off God. That God is salvation. Seek him. This has to be you making this decision. You need to seek salvation from the Lord. That's the big thing in this chapter. If that's the only thing you can go away with, please do that. Seek salvation from the Lord and pass that on to other generations. But you know, the other side note that I wanted to hint at here is the very fact that sin does affect generation after generation after generation. Sometimes we just don't think of the consequences of our sin. And even when we finally do seek repentance and do seek God, sometimes we're still dealing with the consequences, and yet those that are around us have already experienced some of the consequences of our sin. And so based on that, that just continues to go on down the line. And this is something that we need to be thinking about, especially as we're thinking of those that are around us. What kind of influence am I giving? How am I going to influence generation after generation that comes after me? Because this isn't just in our families, this is in our church. We have to have people that step up and choose what is right, choose to stand for what is right and for what's the gospel and for the right doctrine, for what is from the Word of God, because that is what gets passed down to the next generation. This is important. What kind of influence are we having on those that are around us? What kind of legacy are we leaving? What's going to be written on our tombstone? What kind of eulogy will be given? For one thing, make it super easy on your pastor to where all he does is praise God for all that he's done in your life. Don't make it like, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to say about this individual today. Make sure the glory goes to God. Seek His will. Live that life. Seek salvation from Him. Leave a legacy passed down to the next generations. This is the key that we need to see from His Word tonight.